Welcome, everyone, to this deep dive. It's going to be into the life of, well, a true American icon, you could say, President Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
And this is kind of unique because we're looking back on a whole century, not just a presidency.
Hmm.
President Carter, he recently passed away at the age of 100,
Right.
making him the longest-lived U.S. president ever.
Absolutely.
And what's even more remarkable is that some people would argue that his greatest achievements they came after he left the White House.
I think that's fair to say, yeah.
Before we jump in, though, just a quick reminder to subscribe to Untold Chronicles on YouTube and share this video if you're enjoying the deep dive. So to really understand Jimmy Carter, we have to go back to the very beginning.
The beginning, yeah.
We've got biographical excerpts, historical data, political analyses. We're really trying to paint a full picture of this man who went from peanut farmer to peacemaker on the world stage.
It's an amazing story. It really is. And it's that unconventional journey that makes it so compelling. You know, think about it. From a small town in the segregated South to the Oval Office,
Yeah.
it's a path you just wouldn't expect.
No. And his upbringing in Plains, Georgia really shaped who he became.
Absolutely.
It wasn't some elite Ivy League, background.
Right.
We're talking about a childhood on a peanut farm,
Yeah.
experiencing firsthand the realities of rural life in a South that was still, really grappling with segregation and the legacy of the Depression.
Yeah, it was a different time and place for sure. And I think it's crucial to remember that context because it really instilled in Carter a deep sense of empathy
Yeah.
and a drive to fight for social justice. But then we see this really unexpected turn. He goes from the farm to the U.S. Naval Academy,
Right.
serves on submarines. He even works on the nuclear submarine program under Admiral Rickover, who was notoriously demanding.
That's quite a leap from peanuts to nuclear subs.
It is.
It makes you wonder what kind of person can thrive in such vastly different environments.
Well, I think it speaks to his adaptability, his strong sense of duty. He excelled in the Navy, he mastered complex technical skills, and I think he developed a disciplined approach, really, that served him well later on, in his political career.
So how did he go from nuclear physicist basically to politician? It's not exactly a common career trajectory.
No, it's not. And tragedy played a role, actually. When Carter's father passed away, he felt this really strong obligation to return home and take over the family peanut business.
Right.
It wasn't an easy transition. In fact, his first harvest failed due to a drought. Imagine the pressure of trying to keep the family farm afloat,
Yeah.
especially after such a successful stint in the Navy.
It definitely shows a different side of him.
Yeah.
We see his resilience, his business acumen, and that same determination that you're talking about. That pushed him through the Naval Academy.
Yeah, it was always there. And it's during these years back in Plains that his political journey really begins to take shape. He gets elected to the Georgia State Senate and then becomes governor. What's so fascinating to me is how his stance on racial integration evolved during this time.
Yeah.
This is the South in the 1960s,
Yeah.
a period of immense social change.
Yeah. It's almost hard to grasp how much the South was changing during that time.
Yeah.
Did he just jump right into being a vocal advocate for civil rights?
He didn't know. He started out more cautiously,
Right.
trying to navigate the complexities of Southern politics without alienating too many voters, but gradually he became more outspoken in his support for racial equality. And I think it's a nuanced evolution,
Yeah.
reflecting both his personal growth and the shifting tides of public opinion.
And then there's this incredible long shot bid for the presidency in 1976. Here he is, a relatively unknown peanut farmer from Georgia,
Right?
going up against Washington insiders.
Yeah.
What were the odds?
I mean, they weren't great. But America was in a particular mood after Watergate.
Yeah.
Disillusioned with politics as usual, yearning for something authentic.
Right.
And Carter really seized that moment. He campaigned as an outsider, someone untainted by Washington scandals. He promised honesty, integrity, and a government that truly represented the people.
He really tapped into the national mood. And it wasn't just his message, it was his style too. He connected with voters on a personal level, holding town hall meetings, walking the streets, even giving an interview to Playboy magazine, which was unheard of.
Unheard of for a presidential candidate, yeah.
Back then?
Absolutely. That Playboy interview was a calculated risk, but it paid off. It showed he was willing to break the mold. to reach voters in unconventional ways. And it really reinforced his image as a different kind of politician.
So against all odds, he ends up defeating President Gerald Ford
Yeah.
in a very tight race. And in January of 1977, Jimmy Carter walked into the Oval Office facing some of the biggest challenges a president, could inherit. A struggling economy, an energy crisis, and the ever-present threat of the Cold War.
Yeah, a lot on his plate.
A lot on his plate.
Right from the start.
Right from the start. All right, so we've got Jimmy Carter stepping into the presidency, 1977, ready to bring honesty and change to Washington, but he kind of walks right into a storm.
He did, yeah. A storm of economic woes.
Yeah.
Stagflation was the big one.
Right.
This nasty combination of high inflation and high unemployment.
Right.
And it was crippling the country.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you had the 1979 energy crisis.
Right.
With gas lines stretching for blocks and just this growing sense of panic.
Yeah, it sounds like a recipe for disaster for a new president.
Yeah.
How did Carter even begin to tackle these problems?
Well, he did something pretty bold. Instead of focusing on traditional economic stimulus, he called for a moral equivalent of war on energy dependence.
Wow.
He pushed for conservation, he installed solar panels on the White House roof, and even wore sweaters in the Oval Office to encourage people to turn down their thermostats.
Wait, he actually wore sweaters in the White House.
He did.
I
Yeah,
guess that's one way to lead by example.
it is.
But did people actually listen?
Well, it certainly made headlines. He also created the Department of Energy to really focus on this issue long term. But, his efforts weren't always popular.
Yeah.
You have to remember, this was a time when Americans were used to cheap gas
Right.
and plentiful energy.
Yeah.
Asking them to cut back, it felt like a sacrifice to a lot of people.
So not exactly a smooth ride on the economic front.
Yeah.
And I imagine his relationship with Congress wasn't making things any easier.
No, it wasn't. His outsider status and his sometimes blunt style,
Yeah.
it didn't always win him friends on Capitol Hill. He struggled to get his legislative agenda passed, and he faced pushback from both Democrats and Republicans.
So it sounds like gridlock and frustration were the themes of the day, but there were some bright spots, weren't there? I read that he actually made some headway on deregulation.
He did, absolutely. He signed the Airline Deregulation Act in 1978.
Right.
Which led to more competition, lower fares, and ultimately a boom in air travel. It was controversial at the time,
Yeah.
but it had a huge impact on the industry and really made flying more accessible to everyday Americans.
Yeah, that's a great example of how a policy that might seem wonky or technical can actually have a big impact on people's lives.
Absolutely.
And then there was the Chrysler bailout, right?
Yeah.
That one was pretty controversial too.
It was. Chrysler was on the brink of collapse,
Right.
and Carter decided to step in with a government loan guarantee. A lot of people saw it as a risky move, potentially rewarding a failing company.
Right.
But Carter believed it was crucial to save thousands of jobs
Wow.
and a vital American industry.
So he was willing to take those tough stances even if they weren't popular. It shows a certain level of conviction. Speaking of tough choices, let's move into the realm of foreign policy. That's where we really see Carter's idealism and his commitment to diplomacy come into play.
Absolutely. And it's a fascinating mix of bold successes and just agonizing setbacks. One of the most remarkable achievements, of course, was the Camp David Accords in 1978.
Right.
I mean, imagine bringing together the leaders of Israel and Egypt, two nations that had been at war for decades, and Carter managed to broker a peace treaty between them.
Yeah.
Something that seemed almost impossible at the time.
Yeah, it's hard to overstate the significance of the Camp David Accords.
Yeah.
It truly shifted the landscape of the Middle East.
Absolutely.
But I can't imagine it was easy. Didn't he face a lot of opposition?
He did, yeah. Both sides were wary. Even members of his own administration had doubts. But Carter was incredibly persistent. He sequestered himself with Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat at Camp David for 13 days, refusing to let them leave until they reached an agreement.
Wow.
It was a testament to his commitment to peacemaking, his willingness to go the extra mile,
Yeah.
to put in the hard work of diplomacy.
It really makes you think about what can be achieved with a combination of tenacity and a genuine belief in dialogue. But it wasn't all smooth sailing on the foreign policy front, was it? His relationship with the Soviet Union, for example, it seems much more
It
complex.
was, yeah. It was a delicate balancing act between trying to reduce nuclear tensions and standing up against Soviet aggression.
Yeah.
On the one hand, he signed the SALT II treaty with Leonid Brezhnev, aimed at limiting nuclear arms. But on the other hand, he was deeply critical of the Soviet Union's human rights record
Yeah.
and their intervention in Afghanistan.
And that invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 really, really marked a turning point, didn't it? It seemed to shake his view of the Soviet Union and led to a much tougher stance.
Absolutely. He saw the invasion as a blatant violation of international law and a serious threat to global security. His response was swift and decisive. He
Yeah.
imposed grain embargoes, boycotted the 1980 Moscow Olympics, and increased military aid to the Afghan resistance fighters, the Mujahideen.
Those are some serious, serious consequences. It sounds like he wasn't afraid to take a strong stand, even if it meant straining relations with a superpower. But didn't these actions also have repercussions at home?
They did, yeah. The grain embargo, while intended to hurt the Soviet economy, also ended up hurting American farmers, and the Olympic boycott was controversial. Some argued that it politicized a sporting event and hurt American athletes.
So a complicated legacy on that front. And then, of course, there's the Iran hostage crisis,
Yeah.
which unfolded in the final year of his presidency and really casts a long shadow over his time in office.
It did. It was a traumatic event for the nation. The images of blindfolded American hostages being paraded through the streets of Tehran, the failed rescue attempt, the agonizing months of negotiations, it really gripped the American psyche and fueled a sense of helplessness.
It seems like it was a no-win situation.
It was.
Anything he did would be scrutinized and criticized.
Exactly. And it definitely contributed to this perception that he was weak on foreign policy, unable to protect American interests abroad. But in recent years, declassified documents have revealed that the Reagan campaign may have been involved in prolonging the crisis to sabotage Carter's re-election chances.
That's a chilling thought, to think that political maneuvering might have directly impacted the lives of those hostages.
It is.
If true, it certainly adds another layer of complexity to Carter's legacy.
It does, yeah. So we have this president, a man who championed peace and diplomacy, facing this excruciating crisis that he ultimately couldn't resolve before leaving office. It's a heartbreaking end to his presidency. But, as we'll see, it was far from the end of Jimmy Carter's story.
It's amazing to think, about how much we've already covered. From peanut farmer to nuclear submarine officer, Georgia governor, to a president grappling with economic turmoil, Cold War tensions. And then there's that dramatic ending to his presidency with the Iran hostage crisis. You'd think after all that, most people would just want to retire quietly and enjoy some, well-deserved peace and quiet.
Right.
But not Jimmy Carter.
Not Jimmy Carter, no. And that's really what makes his story so remarkable. For most presidents, leaving office kind of marks the end of their time on the world stage.
Right.
But for Carter, it was just the beginning of another chapter,
Yeah.
a chapter filled with purpose, compassion, and a relentless pursuit of peace and justice.
Yeah, it's almost hard to fathom the sheer energy and dedication that he poured into his post-presidency.
Yeah.
He was, 56 when he left the White House?
Right.
An age when a lot of people are starting to think about slowing down.
Exactly.
But he really seemed to hit his stride in the decades that followed.
He did. And, through the Carter Center, which he founded with Rosalind in 1982, he tackled issues that other world leaders often ignored.
Yeah.
Global health, election monitoring, conflict resolution. These weren't just talking points for him.
Right.
He was deeply involved on the ground, making a tangible difference in people's lives.
One of the things that really struck me was his campaign to eradicate guinea worm disease.
Yeah.
It's a parasitic infection that most people in developed countries have never even heard of.
Right.
Yet he made it his personal mission to wipe it off the face of the earth. What do you think? What do you think drew him to this cause?
Well, it's a neglected tropical disease, something that often gets overlooked by the global health community.
Right.
But for Carter, it it represented a chance to make a real difference in some of the poorest, most marginalized communities in the world.
Yeah.
And he nearly succeeded. I mean, when he passed away, there were only a handful of cases left worldwide.
It's amazing.
It really is. It's a testament to his persistence, his focus, his ability to rally people around a cause.
It's truly inspiring, especially considering, I mean, he faced so many setbacks, so many challenges along the way. And it wasn't just about guinea worm. I mean, he was monitoring elections in emerging democracies,
Yeah.
trying to mediate conflicts in some of the world's most volatile regions. He even wrote dozens of books,
Yeah.
from memoirs to poetry.
Yeah.
And in 2002, he received the Nobel Peace Prize for
Mm.
his tireless work promoting peace and human rights.
Yeah, and it's such a stark contrast to the often mixed assessments of his presidency.
Right.
While his time in office was marked by both successes and failures, his post-presidency is almost universally praised.
Yeah.
I think it really shows how a leader can redefine their legacy,
Yeah.
how they can use their platform to continue making a positive impact even after leaving office.
And he never shied away from speaking his mind, even when it meant criticizing sitting presidents, regardless of their party.
Right.
He called out injustice wherever he saw it. He was a man of principle,
Yeah.
and he wasn't afraid to stand up for what he believed in, even when it wasn't popular.
Yeah, it takes a certain level of courage to do that, especially when you're no longer in a position of power.
Yeah.
But for Carter, it seemed to be about doing what he thought was right, not what was politically expedient.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the life of Jimmy Carter, I keep thinking about this question of legacy. He had his share of triumphs and tribulations, both in the White House and beyond. But he never stopped striving to make the world a better place. What do you think is the most important lesson we can take away from his life?
I think he showed us that leadership isn't just about wielding power.
Yeah.
It's about using your influence, your voice, to advocate for justice, for peace, for those who are often overlooked.
Right.
And that it's never too late to make a difference. I
Yeah.
mean, he dedicated his life to serving others, proving that true leadership can extend far beyond the confines of a political office.
Well said. And we want to leave you with that thought. What kind of impact do you want to have on the world? What will your legacy be?
Yeah.
We hope this deep dive into the life of President Jimmy Carter has inspired you to think about these questions and to strive to make a positive difference in your own way.
Absolutely. And if you enjoyed this journey through the life of this remarkable American figure, don't forget to subscribe to Untold Chronicles on YouTube and share this video with others.
Yeah, we believe these conversations about history, about leadership, about making a difference are truly important.
Yeah,
And we want to keep them going.
for sure.
Thanks for joining us for this very special deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep striving to make the world a better place.
Couldn't have said it better myself.